So we're here with Mr. Chambers to talk about Performance Max. How's it going, Mr. Chambers?
Going well, going well. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty well.
Great.
So Performance Max is a pretty big topic, and for a lot of people, I think it could be quite confusing. So how would you describe Performance Max in the simplest terms to somebody who's not very experienced with Google Ads?
I think the simplest terms, and it shows my bias against Google, but it's like Google's all in one simple thing. So it's supposed to be simple, but it's complicated. And the simplest way to put it is probably that it's Google trying to take control away. But also, it's kind of under the guise of making things easier for people, and it does succeed in that. So it makes things easier. It combines every part of the platforms like YouTube, display, search, shopping into one thing. And it makes it simpler in a lot of ways, but also makes it more confusing. I think that's so. The best description is it combines everything into one campaign site.
That's a good way to put it, and it is kind of a paradox like that. So with all of the other Google campaign types, like you have search, that's search, display is display, video is video, discovery, and then like Performance Max is the only one where it doesn't actually create a new channel; it just combines existing channels. And I think that there may like I don't think people are thinking about it in those terms who are maybe not super familiar with it. So then the question is like why is Google like what value do they see in like combining channels into like one kind of campaign? And I think that touches on what you said. I mean, there's a few like really big things here. So let's start with like the angle. Like there's the good side and there's the bad side. So let's start on the bad side because I think that's way more exciting. So like the bad side, I think this is just another part of Google disempowering businesses to like removing information and removing control. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the paradox with that, I don't know if paradox is the right word, but maybe sneakiness to it is that it disempowers them. I agree, but I think it's kind of under the guise of empowering them because it makes it seem like you don't need an expert to do anything. It's like you can just do it yourself. It's kind of like the smart campaigns that they introduced not too long ago. I don't know. I think that it's supposed to be a combination of things that make it easier, but it's not actually doing that. I think it's kind of the bottom line, which I mean it is in some ways, but it's definitely not optimal for everyone like they make it seem.
So, like in terms of the dark side, before I talk about like the good side, I think it's just like there's this pattern of behavior that Google's just been going down this path of like removing a bunch of the search queries, like forcing people to use RSAs. I mean, they've had that sneaky like location setting for a long time. I've seen that waste like over $100,000. I don't know how they get away with that. Like killing Universal Analytics, that's maybe something different. But I think that Google, like, they just have this pattern of behavior of like taking away control, taking away actual useful insights. And the fact that Performance Max doesn't even show you the breakdown by channel, I think that just tells you really everything you need to know. Like, when has like such an aggressive like restriction on information ever actually helped or empowered the businesses in particular? You know?
Yeah, I mean I think it's maybe they didn't expect the reaction they got at least from like professional advertisers because like you said a minute ago it's supposed to combine everything and maybe it's like to people that don't know anything about Google Ads yet when they start learning they take like certification courses it looks like it's all maybe a new channel or it's just like all in this one stream when really like we know it's actually still in different streams we just can't really see the breakdown but it makes it all seem like it's just one thing and it's like oh you don't need a breakdown because if you just started learning with Performance Max you probably wouldn't even know that there could be a breakdown. It's just like that's how it is now.
Yeah. And I think that's why like it would I mean Performance Max is not for agencies because agencies we have the knowledge and the context to be able to figure out like what's more profitable, what's less profitable, where to allocate more money or less money. And then Performance Max is essentially just like you give it money and it just spends. So for a business owner who's like a single person business or like a super small business, it seems like it would maybe be more accessible than spending a bunch of time to figure out Google Ads or like paying somebody to do it. But So I think that's what it's made for. But what we know is like, it's not made for agencies because it restricts that information. And like we know that like not all these channels are profitable. Many would say that display is often um how to put this nicely. I'll put it not nicely. I've heard people say display is a cesspool of scams and illegitimate activity, and that it's just never profitable and everything's like vanity metrics. That's what some saying. That's not what I'm saying. But so like with Performance Max, you're just like pumping money into there. How much money's going in? I don't know. It won't tell you, and it doesn't tell you on purpose because most people avoid those placements. So that's kind of the paradox where like it's a simpler version that makes it seem more accessible for the small business owner. But then because of those limitations to be able to make it that simple, is you're gonna hit some issues pretty quickly in terms of optimizing or making anything better.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to give smaller businesses that can't afford agency fee or like are just getting started like an easier way, kind of like smart campaigns. It's like we know that you should separate branded search from other stuff. They might not know that, and it's like maybe it's better than no advertising if they have a really small budget. But it's weird with Performance Max because it's like that seems to be what it's targeted for is people that like can't afford professionals that can do it better and like separate niche channels and do it even better than Performance Max, because they also recommend a really high budget or at least like relatively high for a small business for Performance Max to even work. So it's like you can't really just advertise Performance Max like $10-15 a day. It's not going to learn. It's not, and like Google will tell you that. So it's like I don't really know who it's supposed to be for, because like you need a big, if you can spend $100 a day, you're like decently established, or at least you're like you can spend some money, and you could afford a freelancer or something or an agency. So I don't really understand like what their target audience is if they're saying like you have to spend a lot. But then like the truth of it is, I guess Google doesn't tell you this, but it's like if you have that money, you're much better off just going with a professional, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like Performance Max, it comes down to like is the question like is it good or bad for Google? It's good. Is it good or bad for businesses? Question mark. That question is actually completely secondary in this case. So like with the small businesses, like they'll spend money on it. They might even go all in on it. And then with the bigger businesses, like at the very least, there will be some kind of pressure to try to test it or try it. So they're at least gonna get some spend allocated to it that way. But I think the the thing with Performance Max and like what you mentioned in terms of like it requiring more spend is, like we could be cynical and say like, okay, that's just Google getting even more money out of people for something that may or may not actually help them. But on the other side, like with Performance Max, because of the lack of control, I think it's really important that you feed the beast a lot of data and good data, assuming that you do want to go forward and test it. So initially, I remember that we were talking to some people, and a lot of people's reaction was, for ecom, it's okay. For lead gen, it's horrible because it's just optimizing for volume of leads, which are often the lowest quality ones. So if you can feed it information from further down in the funnel, that is going to help you a lot, because like with search you can see like the search terms that are coming in. You have an idea of like what the good ones versus the bad ones are searching for. But with Performance Max, like you just need to feed the beast a lot of data and good data. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree it needs a lot of data, but with leads specifically, I think it's also like your CRO, like how is the landing page optimized? How is like what are your qualifiers? Because it becomes that much more important. I mean, personally, I've heard a lot of it not working well and getting low quality leads. So it's like you'd probably just be spending a lot because you pay by the click, right? So like you're paying for them to get there. So it's like even if you're qualifying or you're not having to like sort through leads, it's like you're still wasting money. Um, but I think it's still like that's maybe the future is more automated stuff, and like the CRO and the qualifying with Legion is going to be like way more important because you're not going to have like that top of funnel control. So all you can do is like what can we get at the bottom of it. But I mean, when you're paying per click, it's like you're still spending a lot of money. So I mean, where's the control there?
Yeah. I think it's funny how a lot of professionals in the industry, how it seems like they are like Performance Max is kind of polarizing. So on one end, you have people who say it's the best thing ever and it's like what you should be doing, like all situations, like no matter what, like really leaning into it. And on the other end, you have people who, um, like that we did that webinar with, I think it was like Savvy Revenue, and those
Yeah.
guys are really smart, and they're basically saying like, hey, my interpretation was, it was like, hey, this thing, especially right now, is like we haven't really seen this like perform really well. That was my interpretation, something like that.
Yeah.
So you need to like plan around like how to use it well. So like like don't use it how Google says you should use it, but there's ways that you can adapt to make it work for you. And that kind of goes into the burger structure. And there's like the burger with cheese, like the double Big Mac, the Whopper. So could you explain the burger structure to people so they understand what we're talking about?
Yeah, so I don't remember who came up with that term, but I will say that I use it a lot, and it's part of what you said of like you got to take it and make it work for you, like all the automation, all the Google stuff, because like there's a lot of people that will just say, which like I know a lot of people also that will say like, oh, I'm just not using that. That's like not good. Like I'm gonna stick with the old way, and then those people end up getting like crushed pretty quickly or after a while. So what the what that structure basically is you have performance max without anything except for the shopping listings, which you can do. I've heard rumors that they're gonna like find ways to close that loophole and maybe even have in some accounts, or at least they make it much harder. Like you sometimes have to go back after campaign creation, like fix it. But basically you have this where it's only shopping, and then you have a branded standard shopping to catch like all that, all the branded shopping traffic. You have a non-brand search for prospecting, branded search campaign, and then see, I'm missing like the cheese or the lettuce or something, but that's basically what it is. Is like the shopping only is the core, and it's kind of replacing smart shopping. So you're doing everything that you can to like have a smart shopping, even though they sunset it, and build the accounts around that. And it's something to test. Like it's not going to work in every situation. You got to have a decent sized budget, but like I've seen a lot of success with it.
So I want to roll it back because some people may not even be aware of like the shopping component with like no assets. So essentially,
Yeah.
Performance Max, I mean, it covers all of these different channels, but like the core channel is shopping. So it's primarily like a shopping type is that a shopping type thing because
Yeah.
they removed Smart Shopping. Smart Shopping became Performance Max. So it just completely replaced that, and then it includes the other ones. So what a lot of people don't know is that whenever you make a Performance Max campaign, assuming you're doing ecom, if you do not create any asset groups, then it will only run as a smart shopping campaign. And that is, at least in my experience, that's the only times like I personally have used it successfully is when it just replaces the shopping campaign because otherwise the alternative is standard shopping. And of course, Google is going to give better placements to like the smart shopping, like new variation. So anyway, so what you can do is you can essentially force it to just be a shopping campaign, and then when you do that, you're essentially start creating the burger that we mentioned. So like that is like the meat or something. I don't remember what each ingredient is.
I don't know I don't know the ingredients. I just know that they're all like parts of a cheeseburger.
So when and so like you want to have those segmented out, but then like as Mr. Chambers had mentioned, you want to segment out the branded traffic from Performance Max always because the branded traffic is going to have such a radically different return on ad spend versus non-brand. So you gotta have that separate. So in this case, like you can just run that as a standard shopping. And then those are the layers essentially where like Performance Max, non-brand shopping, and then you have a branded standard search shopping, and then you have like search components outside of Performance Max because inside Performance Max, like you have even less control. You're gonna get horrible search queries, and then like God help you if you're using display or video for Performance Max. But the messed up part about all of that is like, so you're thinking like, okay, so you can actually like add negatives into Performance Max. Well, like they don't want you to, so like they make it so incredibly difficult and annoying to do that that I think that's also just indicative of like Google's true intentions. So to be able to do that, like you have to like email a rep like a special thing with a template and like go back and forth a couple times or something. And they just,
Right.
some software engineer just sat down and went out of his way to like prevent you from adding keyword lists to Performance Max. And
Yeah.
like I don't know how you could ever think that like that is helpful, but anyway, this is the situation that we're in.
I mean, I think like the conspiracy theorists, including myself, would probably say that it's supposed to be unhelpful, because it's built into the UI to where like if you get a negative keyword list added to Performance Max, you can see it just like you can in your negative keyword list. Like it'll say added to this campaign, so it's in the system that it's possible. There's just no page to do it, and they don't even tell all of the Google reps that it's possible. So sometimes you'll have to email and like and then they'll email you back and say that's not possible, and then you just have to try again until you get a rep that knows it's possible. And it's just very confusing. I think it's on purpose, but
and
that's maybe another conversation.
and and yeah, without going down that rabbit hole too much, because I'm gonna get fired up. Is like let's talk about like why do you even want to like segment it out in the first place? And it's because Performance Max is a cannibal. It will cannibalize your other campaigns. So if you're running like a search campaign, and you know you've got all of the negatives, and you got the target in there, like you've got like you know like a pretty solid setup, and especially maybe you even have some ETAs, you know, from back in the day. Maybe they're still running, and then you start a PMax. It's gonna run to like it's gonna just run like over your search campaign, and cannibalize the traffic. And again, putting the tin foil hat back on is I think it will probably cannibalize like the best, most promising search queries because I think it'll give better placements to the PMAX. So then here's what happens, and then here's like the real damage, and then like it's gonna cannibalize that. Then business owner sees like, oh, Performance Max performing better than search, and then you know, okay, kill search, pour more money into Performance Max. So now you just have like a downgraded version of what you were doing before, and you're spending like who knows how much money on display, in video, and whatever else. So do you have any thoughts on this cannibalization aspect and how to overcome it, or I mean, is that just the burger method?
So the negatives, I think in terms of like ways to overcome it, it's the negatives. It's really all you can do. I had a bunch of different theories of ways around it until I found the negative keywords, and that's the thing that worked best. Because it's going to cannibalize anything except for exact match keywords. Even those, sometimes in some cases it will. And then it's like depending on quality score, it's a lot of like really technical stuff. Um, but you can add negatives in. So if you're adding negative keyword list, you can do brand terms, but you can also add regular negatives to that list. And I feel like, so you'll see a lot on LinkedIn, people say like, oh, like I'm testing Performance Max, it's doing this well. And probably 9 times out of 10, I'll see someone in the comments, or it'll be me asking if they took the branded terms out, and they'll say like, oh no, but this, but that but always is like kind of ruins all the data because it's not just cannibalizing, it's all like your brand search. So since PMAX is also learning, if you have brand terms in there, it's learning that those are the high converting things and other things convert less. And so it's pushing everything in the wrong direction of where you want it. And so it's like, it's not just cannibalizing that traffic, it's also ruining the PMAX because
And
you have no idea what it could do non-brand if you have the brand terms in there.
and that's what makes it so complicated. Also, like you mentioned, I completely forgot about that. That like the like when it cannibalizes things, it's not like a simple process. There's like all these charts of like in this situation with this keyword with this bidding thing it will, over in this one it won't, and then this one it will,
Yeah.
and this one it won't, and you need a whole diagram, and it looks like you're trying to figure out how to like split atoms or something. Like that's like how complicated they made it, and it's just like Jesus Christ, like is that really necessary? And I think that like this whole thing of like the paradox of things becoming simpler but then also becoming like way more complicated and nuanced is the trend in digital marketing, where it's easy to there's a couple things going on. It's easy to do things. It's easier to do things than ever before. Like the barrier to entry is lower, but to do things well is becoming so much harder than ever before because you used to be able to read like an article, and it's like, okay, like you know, here's what I do with the negatives. Here's how to test new ads. Like I know how to do it. It's just it's just gonna take a while. But nowadays it's like you read an article, and then it's like, what camp are they in? Are they like pro Google? Are they anti Google? Like,
Yeah.
can I even believe what they're saying? And then it's like, like what's their angle? Like, what are they getting out of this? And then like the algorithm's gonna like change faster. So then like whatever you read like a year ago, 2 years ago, that's obsolete. So do you have any thoughts on that paradox where like everything's simpler, but then it's also way more complicated at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's to where now you hear it depends way more, and that's just that's like the blanket answer for everything, and it's the right answer in a lot of cases, more so than it used to be, like in the days of Skags and things like that. It was like, this is how you do it. If you do it like this, you're gonna have the best chance. But now, like you said, there's different camps, and sometimes both camps are correct. They might be correct more than others, but it's like if this is your school of thought, if you have your account set up in this camp, maybe you should do it this way. Or if your philosophy is this, maybe you should do it this way. And then it's like intertwined with what your clients want. So I think it's harder, but I think the harder thing is that you have to learn constantly. Like it's always been like a lot of information to learn. in Google Ads. But now there's a lot of information to learn, maybe even less to get started. But to actually stay good and to stay really good, you have to learn every single day. And like, because if someone wasn't learning like every day, every week, then I don't understand how you could even like do Google Ads professionally after even just like 6 months. If you just stopped learning and then try to do Google Ads like 6 months later, you wouldn't know what to do at all.
Yeah.
Like it changes that fast now.
It changes that fast, and it's a hard line to walk because on one side, if you're not staying up to date with all of the changes, then you're gonna get crushed. And on the other side, if you're one of those people who just like go all in with everything Google's saying, okay, like that client, like when he comes to me and I get in the ad account, I'm gonna crush you and take your client. So like you can't do that either because that's just like not gonna work. So
Yeah.
it's so hard to figure out the way to just walk the middle road, and I don't know, and that's a challenge that just didn't even exist before.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing now is making it work for you, like all the new Google stuff, because a lot of it gives you opportunities and it gives you the ability to do things that you couldn't do with old campaign types. It's just if you go full tilt into what Google wants, it's probably going to destroy your account, like make you lose the client, make them lose money. But if you just take the best parts and then find what like the negative keyword list in Performance Max, that's like some weird trick someone came up with. You can do that, and there's so many of those nowadays. And if like the more you know, it's like collecting oh no, it's like collecting like power ups or something. And the more you have, the better you can do. But you have to like really work at learning to get more of them. And it's like, okay, I can do this better. I can leverage this better. But like, there's just almost not enough time to learn everything nowadays, unless you're really dedicated to it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and um, yeah, I don't know what to say. Um, so do you have any additional thoughts on Performance Max?
Not really beyond what we talked about. I mean, I'm interested to hear other people's opinions. Like, I like hearing your opinion on it, and like, I like talking to people about this because it kind of ties into what you just said a minute ago about there's different schools of thoughts, like different camps, and a lot of people like there's a lot of really smart people I know that are really good at PPC that think completely different things about Performance Max. And the like very confusing thing is that most of them are correct, even if they're think completely opposite things. So it's like it's very hard to figure out, and I think it's just like finding ways to make it work for you and trying to kind of ride the line, like ride the dragon between going fully into the automation and just like putting your feet into it.
Yeah, I think it's good to have people around who have different opinions, and to basically, yeah, like experiment and be open minded, but also be kind of like skeptical, just a little bit, just like when Google says something, just like, okay, what are they really, after
Assume
here?
it's
So
yeah, assume it's false.
yeah, instead of yeah, so you don't want to be like the cranky old guy, but you don't want to be like the super gullible person, and sometimes like it feels like I'm losing my mind because it's like stuff is like so contradictory and goes different ways, and like sometimes one thing will work one way or the other way. So I mean, if you ever need to find like your like North Star and you're like trying to like find your way, just like whatever the Google reps are saying, just do the opposite, and like that's like a surefire way to like make sure you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, yeah, you'll at least be in decent shape if you just do what they don't tell you to do.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's really all the questions that I had. So, do you have any parting wisdom for us, Mr. Chambers?
I don't know about parting wisdom. I mean, I think we covered stuff. Just to summarize, because I think it's really important. I know I've said this like 5 times, but I think it's just like straddling that line between automation and not enough of it, and just like making sure that you're learning is the biggest thing. Like constantly learning and making it work for you is the only way to do it. Like I think having solid opinions about Google is a terrible idea because like things in Google Ads, because if you get stuck into one thing, it's like, oh, but this is how I do it, then that's going to change and you're just going to be left behind.
I agree. I like that that closing out. So, thank you for your time, Mr. Chambers.